One who wants to see it. Um, I'm muting people, uh, and I think you have to unmute yourselves when you're called on. Uh, Hilton, whom I will introduce after uh, I begin, is going to be the MC, and he's going to do all all of the introductions. Uh, I believe that we also have Omertà books available for sale, and maybe Megan can write the address and the PayPal account in the chat. And you also are all free to chat if you like. And when you're reading, I will spotlight you, or I will try to spotlight you. Uh, so, I mean, I think those are the ground rules. Uh, just to introduce myself briefly, I've been friends with Les since about 1966 at Columbia, and we worked on the Columbia Review together. There's a bunch of people, Columbia Review people here, aside from Hilton and myself. There's also Bruce Kawin, and there's Larry Weeder, and there's David Anderson, and let me just look on the second page. There were some other people who were coming, but I'm not quite seeing them yet. But this was a very live and vital time. And I should say that Les was a terrific influence, or maybe a terrible influence, on my writing. I'm not sure which. At the time, I thought it was terrific. I still think it's terrific. So I'm going to read a poem of Les's, and then a poem of mine from that time. I have been writing poetry again after a long delay, but I thought I'd read an old poem of mine when it's my turn. I didn't have an Omertà book. I had an Omertà book in preparation, but when Les died, it was still in preparation, so I put it out myself. Anyway, I'm going to read a poem of Les's called "We're Friends Again," and this is a poem from this anthology, A Cinch, which is a collection from the Columbia Review that Les and Hilton and I edited in 1969. We're friends again. He will not dare to step with the divinely human, the unconsciously brief, the time-saving in general. Idiocies? You notice I don't include neckties. He was panting a lot. It was oddly diverting to see the voice of a man who kept calm under fire. I felt about. The next to last poem is about a young married nose, to the point where a salt tablet might have all but sang its way across the room to me. Her husband's chuckle sounded again. What seat? I just meant that their apartment's so tiny, and apparently he was at their apartment when they. She sat down heavily on one of the twin beds. I closed the door behind me. I began to open more minutes without drinking, and then I put it, a doll, in the seat with her, and turns its head around, the head. He had written in letters that had not quite survivor's conceit that he's the only one alive who knew, simply because I was the owner of a pad and pencil. He, considerably with age as our faces filled out, I, this afternoon, stopped dead short in the middle of the house. It's exactly 2 doors down from where Carol, nominally ventilated, as I remember, abounded with MPs, presents in their apartment. Why then did I go on grounded everywhere, including, I'm sure, the middle? You would have been working on if you had known of performing circus people and performing, so to say, at this point. It doesn't seem to be merely chummy. Bullseye, poet's vocabulary, his nonstop talks, his suddenly appearing in your street in a canoe. That's pretty good, I think. Now, where did I put mine? That's an interesting question. Oh, here there, on the floor, of course. So I'm going to read a poem that I wrote in the summer of 1968. And some of you know that for many years, I've been a practitioner of Zen Buddhism. And that practice began and temporarily ended in the summer of 1968 when we were all in Berkeley after the Columbia uprising. Les and Hilton and I and our partners, Pam, Nancy, Kathy, all came out to Berkeley and got an apartment. And we began to sit Zazen at the Berkeley Zen Center, which is where I picked it up after a hiatus of about 12 or 15 years. But that summer, under the influence of what we were doing and what I was reading, I wrote a poem that's called Zazen. And this is also in Cinch. And I just revised it a little bit last week, but very little. Zazen. Master Dogen's way is continuous practice. I have placed these words at my sitting place, 3 feet above my cushions. In my private zendo, I meditate, shikantaza, for 7 hours every day. Shi means a stopping of the mind, as a truck rams a warehouse wall. Kan is the view, what the teamster sees just before the crash. Taza is sitting. I must sit, sit, and sit. The walls step back and lie down when I sit. The rooftop flies up and shines, a new star in the firmament. The kitchen is a festival of dancing knives. This all happens as I sit, but I am not led from our way. Delusions, the master shouts. Do not believe these mind pictures, he warns. So, sitting in the 6th hour, dusk climbing out of gray holes in the mountain, I will see the first star on the other side of a clear brown eye. So thank you. I want to introduce Hilton, who will be the MC for the rest of this. And Hilton, if you would unmute yourself, I will tell people about you. Hilton Obenzinger has been the author or editor of almost a dozen books. Most recently, the book Treif Pesach, Unkosher Passover. He retired as Director of Honors and Advanced Writing at Stanford University, and more recently as the Associate Director of the Chinese Railroad Workers in North America project at Stanford. His other books include Busy Dying, New York on Fire, and This Passover or the Next, I Will Never Be in Jerusalem, which received the American Book Award. He was co-editor with Les and with me of A Cinch, Amazing Works from the Columbia Review. And so now I turn this event over to Hilton.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for coming on behalf of Les. I'm going to read some things at the end, just a little introductory stuff. First of all, here is our playlist, and I think it's enough for a baseball team with, designated hitter even. Okay, Sharon, Doubiago, Herb Gold, Jack Hirschman, Genny Lim, Bill Crossman with piano, David Anderson, Julie Rogers, Bill Zavatsky, myself, and then Megan at the end for appreciation and for information about getting the Omertà books. I'll introduce everyone briefly. I wrote up, asked people for a little write-ups, but Les was a remarkable writer. And what's interesting is how much he was able to produce, particularly later in life, because he put aside poetry for a long time in order to work on political work. Let me see. He was originally from Portland, and he was pivotal in the literary scene at Columbia and the Lower East Side. His first poem was published in 1965 in C magazine. He worked with Beat and New York school writers, Allen Ginsberg, Anne Waldman, Ted Berrigan, Ron Padgett, Diane DePrima, many others. And he developed, younger writers such as Allen and myself, David Shapiro, David Lehman, Mitch Siskin, Paul Auster, David Anderson. And then co-edited this A Cinch. So he moved to San Francisco in the 70s. He worked with Fitz Printing. He worked eventually at Golden Gate University, where he taught English and critical thinking for 28 years and various administrative roles. Dating back to his participation in arrest during 1968 occupation of Columbia, he dedicated his life to fighting for human rights, opposing racism and colonialism. He worked with the Prairie Fire Organizing Committee and contributed to their journal Breakthrough, and as well as the John Brown Anti-Klan organization. He began Omertà publications, later in life. I think 2003, first publishing his own works as a vehicle for, and he published numerous books. I'm trying to find where I put my notes here. He also was deeply involved in solidarity with Eritrea and traveled there several times, teaching at Asmara University and helping the newly independent country start a newspaper. And he wrote a book, To Fight and Learn, about education during the revolutionary movement. And he maintained that interest. He's published in Omertà 45 chapbooks, more or less, 23 writers and poets, including people who are reading today. The chapbooks are designed, printed, and bound by Les, although the covers are designed by his son, Jesse Gottesman. And as he wrote, he has touched every page of every copy. So you have that magic. Just one other thing here. He wrote a little in one of his books, In Your Dreams, an author's statement, and I'll just read a couple of sentences from it. My poems are designed to be an experience, not message or advice, insight, testament, etc. a reader will enjoy in a sophisticated and mindful way. I admit the poems tend to be complex, the experience complicated. It doesn't take long before enough is enough, so I keep the poems short. And here is one of his short poems. Deal. The cosmos promises to load my book on the real hard drive. And we'll load this on the real hard drive too. And I want to just show a photo from the era. I don't know if I can get it so everyone can see it. This is almost a classic photo. It's just simply the way everyone is posing. On the, can you see Les in here? I'll bet you may not be able to recognize him. He's kind of in the center with that longish hair and kind of dreamily looking to one side. I'm standing next to him, also with long hair, with Pam Foreman, or Pam Reitman now. Alan is to the left, or my left, or here. And Michael Steinloff, who is a scholar of Yiddish and Polish culture and literature. David Lehman, who is a poet and edits the Best Poetry in America series. Rick Winston, who is a longtime owner of a repertory movie theater in Vermont. Let's see, Larry Susskind, who is right there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Larry Weeder.
Oh, did I say Susskind? Yeah, Larry Weeder. Okay, and Jack Levert next to him. I think that's it. So it's kind of Larry Weeder. Sorry. And it was really kind of, now if you notice, it's all men except for Pam. Columbia was segregated by sex until the 80s, in fact. And there are wonderful writers at Barnard. I mean, Entezaki Shange, Tulani Davis, many writers who we actually only discovered more about during the 40th anniversary of the 1968 occupation. So let me move ahead. So our first reader, and we're trying to keep these short, read a poem that Les published, or one of his poems or two. So Sharon Doubiago is the author of Naked to the Earth, The Visit, My Father's Love, Volume 1 and 2, Portrait of the Poet as a Young Girl, and Portrait of the Poet as Woman, Love on the Streets, Selected and New Poems, and more. She's received many literary awards and continues to roam and write. And where is I try to get as many of the Poet is the book by her that Les published, unless there was another one too, I don't know about. Sharon, please.
You'll have to unmute yourself. You have to unmute yourself, or Hilton could unmute you, or whoever's the host.
I can, but I'm looking for Sharon. Does she have another name on this?
Yeah, Robert Yoder.
Okay.
Name didn't get up there somehow.
How about now?
No,
Yes.
no, it's Robert Yoder all the way.
Oh.
If you just remember, I'm not Robert Yoder.
No, but
I can't hear most of you guys. I can't hear you now at all. Can you hear me?
yes,
Yes, we hear you now.
Okay.
we're all muted.
Okay. This is Somebody Else, to Lenore Candle. I think, I may be wrong, but I think I read with her in her last reading. Okay. It's called Somebody Else. This case and salts baskets, champagne and its derelicts, flopsy and mopsy. Work under pressure of a lover's orgasm is the ocean basing. Decisions on me, my eyes are rolling across town, call it the street in my shoes, that capital punishes my precocious infiltration. Smokes killed Ayn Rand, that's deeply objective. This is immediately epic. And the other one I chose to read is Seattle, and I chose this poem because Seattle means a lot to me, and I've spent a lot of time there. Seattle. Gazing into the abyss one day, I saw seabirds flapping about for a rock to roost, rest, rust, or roast on, and drop the white flux of their special disgust. That it was my adultery, unless blind fish exaggerate. Many men would prefer to see a lemon in a bird cage flying over lightning. And I'm going to read one poem from Omertà, and the book is called I Poet, the chapbook, and it's called Tongue Tie. The words come out of my fingers, not my mouth. The words have never come out of my mouth. The cord under my brother's tongue had to be cut, the frenulum, lingual, penal. Tongue cut out, the words come out of the body. My mixed race whole self mixed up, the foreskin too tight under tongue's erection. Throat closing down, lost clitoris, pianist practicing the notes to urge them out. I put on lipstick to answer the telephone, acupressure for my phone phobia. I keep a stick under my pillow to change the dream. I just don't like to talk. The main body of my work, Teresa Cha declared, is with language before it's born on the tip of the tongue. She spoke 5 languages, but even so, she was murdered. 3 trials, 2 convictions, both men later proven innocent. They still don't know about number 3, but he's in for life. In the beginning, Nieto, I was Teresa, an experimentalist, then a language poet. I didn't want to know my story, or ours. I didn't want to be killed. I'm still mute, but this is the way I can write it. So no rules, dear love, Nieto. You must find your own language, your only tongue, the only rule. Thank you.
Okay, I'm unmuted.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, the next reader
Okay.
is Herb Gold, who I don't know, 96 now or thereabouts, more or less. One of his more recent books is Still Alive, A Temporary Condition. And he's been writing poetry. He started writing poetry in Cleveland, the Paris of Northeastern Ohio. And as a young man, he left for Columbia College in New York, another relation to Columbia, and to Paris and Port-au-Prince in Haiti. He's published approximately 20 novels and collections of stories and several nonfiction books, plus at least 1 book of poems published by Omertà, Nearing the Exit. See the series of photos at different stages of life on the cover. Herb was a good friend of Les's. Please.
Okay,
Now?
you're on.
Okay, I'm on. Megan promised to hit me over the head hard if I overstay my time. And I see other people are really talking a lot about that wonderful man, Les Gottesman. I'm going to be very brief and just say how I met him. I was about 20 years ahead of him at Columbia, and at the Columbia Review. I was a contemporary of Jack Kerouac, whom I didn't like at all, and Allen Ginsberg, whom I liked a lot, but who often didn't get angry with me because he was in love with Jack. Anyway, so Les asked me to appear at a reunion of Columbia Review poets, and that's how we met. I, and as we talked, I got to liking him pretty quickly, actually. We became friends, and he asked me if I would do a chapbook for him, and of course I was happy to do that. So I'm going to go straight to some poems. First, I'm going to recite a 4-line poem, which I know by heart, by my son Ari. Ari and I are writing poems to each other. Scribble
I'm
me
over here.
Scribble me a poem, is what he said. And I think we're stimulating each other. We have a kind of dialogue of poets and poems going. And if Omertà had continued, I would have introduced him to Les. And I think he would have published a book of Ari's poems. Anyway, the poem of Ari's, which I don't have to read because I know it by heart, and it's pretty short. It's called Vegetarian or Vegetarianism. I'm not a vegetarian because I love animals. I'm a vegetarian because I hate plants. And that poem, it's not the most moving poem he's written. And now I'd like to read one of the very recent poems.
You're okay.
Did I do something?
No, you're okay.
It's called the Unsexy Southern Belle. And as a lifetime writer of stories and novels and narrative, I like poems that tell a story. So this tells you a little about San Francisco and about this particular woman whom I disguise, maybe by not using her name. The Southern Belle, my friend said, looks like, oh, the lips, the body, who wouldn't grow breathless to meet her? I wouldn't either. And it was true, lovely eyes, and etc. We met for dinner. She also looked like Marilyn Monroe, only without the heat. New York, she declared, doesn't understand the human potential movement. Who is New York? I sweetly inquired. What? He unsweetly replied. She married an energetic practitioner of what else? The human potential movement. Perhaps while discussing, that is, agreeing about Esalen, Est, and a vegan diet, they conceived a child who grew up and married an insurance salesman, but in a tribute to her mother's memory, adopted the urine cleanse, sipping it out of wine glasses. I still don't have an answer, correct answer to so many questions. I have time to read another one?
Certainly.
Okay, this is one also that I wrote fairly recently. My son Ari made a little imitation book about it. It's called Magic Kim. Kim Lister, white-haired dream girl, who insisted she was not too young for me. But you are, I proclaimed, while still engorged with desire, as I awakened into my inescapable 96th year, which I've been doing regularly these days. But remember her name from my dream, Kim Lister, means, does it not, that I'll find her, meet her, treasure her, today, as she convinces me she is not too young. I'm not too old. Kim, white-haired dream girl, magic Kimmy. Either you really exist out there on the hill I climb, or the cafe where I order cafe latte, or I'll need to sleep again tonight. Is that enough? You don't want me to do that.
You can do another.
Okay, well, let's see. I think appropriately, I do the last poem from, it's very short. It's a kind of an apology for writing poetry. The last poem from the chapel nearing the exit, which Les was good enough to publish. Okay, this is it. A headline in the National Enquirer found on an empty airline seat. Moby Dick author died broke. The front page bulletin quoted a letter to her mother from Herman Melville's wife. Dear mother, I have terrible news for you. Herman has taken to writing poetry. This is not a poem, but it puts the appropriate stop to the preceding poems, which are not really poems either. Exit near, I recognize the hour, you guys stay. That roar of applause is from Megan.
Okay, thank you. Next at bat is Genny Lim, former San Francisco Jazz Poet Laureate, author of 5 poetry collections, if I'm right, 5, maybe more. Winter Place, Child of War, Paper Gods and Rebels, and Kra, which is published by Omertà. There we go. Oh, you got La Morte del Tempo, and co-author of Island, Poetry and History of Chinese Immigrants on Angel Island, which also received the American Book Award, and a forthcoming anthology of senior Asian American memoirs, Window, Glimpses of Our Storied Past. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start with Omertà Publications, Explanations of Benefits. This is poems by Les. My Raven. Cancer shelf with half-alive egg, blue earth. The erotic menace backs off. Columbus liked his dollars isometric. Hart Crane preferred sailors. Today's functional equivalents shop for crimes unbelieved, like colored letters missing from the alphabet. 2, dead queens of all the Englands wave a rotting sleeve at a bedlam of crimes. The bride is the bribe. Smell the feud, all is 3, it's a smart summer on the blue-green coast of a grave. My flat heart toggles. I absorb a splintered package, her habeas corpus. Oh, the accessories, a cruel pill and a tall feather. Death wince, infrared. 4, feeling of being in every position ever, or, and, predicate flipped onto a platter, and the new fanged angled century sped the losing action history word, skin and tonic in the pageant of chlorophyll, George. He fell on his thinnest sword, leaving a fuselage of non sequiturs bleeding on the porch. 5. Do you wonder why I'm here, spending air on the soundtrack of our avoidance? Because I admit no crime. I explain no body. I trade no reversal. I cross no eclipse. I pin no aleph to its shadow. I steal no steel degree. My ghost resume, selling knockoff gods, I mean goods, and belonging everywhere. Be careful. 1933. Pretty cool, huh? That was Les. And this is from the book he published in 2007. And craw is not a Chinese or Indian word. It's the cry of the raven. Okay, this is, I'm going to read. What happened to the one I wanted? Oh, here. A song for Milarepa. I'm sure Julie knows who Milarepa is, and Alan Senauke, and maybe some of you. Milarepa was a legendary Tibetan Buddhist yogi who endured many trials before he meditated in a mountain caves for many years and reached enlightenment. And he was the lineage father of Tibetan Buddhist tantric school of Tibetan Vajrayana. History is a widow in search of her shadow. Last night the moon shone over old Jerusalem. It was the same moon who had spied the bay of San Francisco. She gazed sadly at me with the lamp of her eye blazing in my mind. The next lifetime will be longer, more desolate a road than this lifetime. So you will need a horse to travel along easily. Just then a plastic bottle bobbed under the pier and I shuddered in the bone-chilled wind of January. History is the garbage of the world, and life, the suffering of loss. The fog slips a murky glove over the Golden Gate, and I reflect on the 1,000 songs of Milarepa, a cave yogi who turned green from subsisting on nettles and renouncing the world. Last night, the moon shone over the Temple Mount, but was it the same moon that had shone on Al-Aqsa, or the moon who had wept at the border checkpoint where a boy had lain in the red pool of his unspent manhood? I cocked my head to glimpse a shooting star, light years from sorrow.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Terrific. Well, okay. Let me get my order here. Oh, yes. Jack Hirschman. He was a poet laureate of San Francisco from 2006 to 2009. He's written and edited more than 100 books of poetry, including translations from numerous languages. His books include Endless Threshold, Front Lines, Only Dreaming Sky, and numerous arcanes, including Quintet, 5 arcanes from Omertà. Let me see if I have the copy here. Well, I have it here somewhere. So, thank you. Take it away, Jack.
Hello. It's good to be with you all. I'm going to read a couple of poems of Les. very short ones. Just back away from the nuclear threat, hidden in the green and yellow basket of arguing potatoes. Bravo, bravo. And stone. Sleep is truth. Its avatar is stone. I dream by the yard. Protein for winter. I dream I make trouble. And when I wake up, I start making trouble. And then I would like to read an arcane that I wrote. It's called the Omertà Arcane in memory of Les Gottesman. 1. Oh, I should put, is this here? Did I do, is that correct? Oh, no. Am I, no. Do you hear me? You
We
hear
can
me?
hear you, but the video is off.
Yeah. I don't know why. The Omertà Arcane in memory of Les Gottesman. 1. A poet of deep activism in many areas of this life. I'm sorry, I only got to know him when he said he'd be happy to give me a lift to North Beach from a reading in honor of David Meltzer at the old Serendipity Digs, become a Berkeley gallery. He asked me for some work for his Omertà, and in fact, my 5 arcanes he published as quintet is the only group of arcanes published in the United States. And you'll be proud of Les in the future, dear Megan, because that chapbook will be importantly recognized. And he'd be a proud native of Portland, standing in solidarity with that courageous city that's a screwdriver screwing the screw into the cock of that fascist Trump, shouting, "You don't matter. Long live Les, who does, even in death, who fought against the KKK and Nazi skinheads with the John Brown anti-Klan group, brought clothes and medical supplies to orphanages in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar, who taught literacy to teenagers in the struggle for modern Eritrea, and who, with Omertà, gave us 45 voices, including his own quirky, surreal wisdom, as well as that Chinese epic homage by the international poet G.D. Magia called For Vladimir Mayakovsky, a deep tribute to the first revolutionary street poet of the 20th century. 2. In a Venezuelan guadua, a bamboo cup from which I've been drinking Stalichnaya vodka each night for the past dozen years, I pour my beloved elixir and raise it in my writing hand to toast the image of what's less that's more remembered, for having brought forth with a modesty verging on self-effacement some major works in the life of contemporary poetry in the spirit of Atrimo, which is Omertà backwards. That is the marvelous sensibility of the less that's most more, Les Gottesman presente.
Terrific. That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Jack. Bill Crossman. He's a pianist, composer, and educator, innovator in freely improvised jazz piano. His musical, John Brown's Truth, focusing on the last year of the abolitionist's life, has been staged throughout Northern California and in New York City. A poet himself, Bill's jazz piano has accompanied poetry readings by Al Young, Jenny Lim, David Meltzer, and others. Omertà published War in America, a 25th issue. It was first published in 1993, and this is the 25th anniversary issue that's revised with new poems. So, thank you.
Thank you,
Bill.
Hilton. I met Les in the mid-70s around our politics, but we bonded not only with politics, but with poetry and with jazz. And but I'm going to start out with a poem from this book, Explanation of Benefits. And these covers, as Hilton said, have been designed by his son, Jesse, a very talented printmaker and graphic designer and artist. This is called Pent Up House. Thought very timely for all of us sheltering in. But in the last decades of his life, Les was a determined surrealist poet. He thought it was very important to not be a non-surrealist. A non-surrealist, he said, they give you the dots and then they connect the dots for you in terms of meaning and so on. Les said, no. We surrealists, he said, we give you the dots, but then we let you connect the dots based on your experience, your imagination, and so on. This is Pent Up House. Diaspora of spacelings now incite your card, who once were baggagey contestants falling in the snow. Siberia shakes, survivors sponge the flag-waving air, their made-up minds and afterthought. Expletive unsealed, a flopped transparency exaggerates my tool and loot, not a dry eye in the house. So that's the future foretold, to the knife point of extinction at the event horizon, far, far away in January. The neck is saved for last. Meanwhile, vex you, emetic voicemail. From Explanation of Benefits. And a poem I'd like to read from War in America, published very recently by Omertà, is called Southwest LA Spring, 1992. Now this resonates back to the Rodney King beating, the uprising that took place in Watts and in LA around that, Black people rising up in insurrection. And of course, we're seeing the protests now about police brutality against Black people and brown people. So it resonates now. Southwest LA Spring, 1992. These first two sentences are quotes from city leaders as the uprising was winding down in LA at the time. Quote, after a riot, healing must happen, unquote. Second quote, the community raged, now it needs to heal, unquote. And I say, we've heard these voices before, speaking as if Southwest LA were a body with third-degree burns, and healing only meant the scabbing over of burnt flesh, a drop in surface temperature, the quote, cooler heads, unquote, back in charge. We've heard these betrayals before. Only freedom can heal a slave revolt. When warring street youths knotted their colors, shot hoops together, addressed their common enemy with one rhythm, one beat, it was deeper than skin deep. So I'm given a couple more minutes to talk about uh, a story of Les, me, and this tune. I'm going to move this so you can see the keyboard a little bit. I think you know this tune. Yes, it's Take the A Train by Billy Strayhorn. It became the signature tune for Duke Ellington's orchestra. Les and I bonded around jazz, and we found out that we both haunted the jazz clubs in New York City. I starting in the 50s, Les in the 60s, and we both heard stories from the black jazz musicians about this tune, Take the A Train. The lyrics at the beginning are, if you take the A train, you'll find you'll get to Harlem in a hurry, or you'll find it's the quickest way to get to Harlem. And we heard people, musicians saying, hey, we haven't seen Joe around for a while. What happened to him? Where's he been? They say, oh, you hadn't heard? Yeah, it's too bad. He took the A train. And we realized that taking the A train became vernacular for having passed away. So in Les's honor, I want to say, if you haven't heard that Les passed away exactly a year ago, I have to tell you, with love and respect, as the story was told with the black musicians too. Yes, Les took the A train. And one more thing, having asked jazz musicians in New York, well, why the A train? Well, they said, well, it's, maybe gone to the ancestors, the A train. And it's the quickest way to get to Harlem. Well, Harlem was the heaven for black musicians who played downtown, but then went back to Harlem in the early morning after their gigs for their peace and survival and safety. So Les, this is for you.
right. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thanks. Thanks, Bill. Terrific. Well, don't take the A train anytime soon. Okay. Next reader is David Anderson. Now, David Anderson writes mostly about medical and public health. He's currently editor of NIDA Notes, the research dissemination website of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, one of the National Institutes of Health. Now, he's written fiction, and he's one of the authors in A Cinch, and published in journals. And he still writes fiction, and he produced a this short story called Backstory that Omertà produced, and he's currently finishing a novel. So he lives with his wife Marguerite Fretlowitz and a puppy, Marco Polo, in Washington, D.C. The puppy might be a little bit older now, right? There he is. Okay. Definitely Marco Polo. Okay, David. Make sure you unmute yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here with everyone. I'm no longer with NIDA Notes Hilton. I'm now retired. And my wife's name is Feitlowitz.
No glasses on.
All right.
Feitlowitz.
I did want to say a little about knowing Les. You know, I was met Les at Columbia. I was with Les on and Hilton and Alan and the rest of the people on the Columbia Review and in Low Library. I then was out of touch with everyone for a bit. And Les was present or instrumental in two great interventions in my life. One was Les and Alan and Hilton and Pam and Kathy and Nancy helped me get myself together and get back on my feet when I showed up in San Francisco in the early 70s after having wandered too long and discovering that I was no longer traveling, I was homeless. And then later on, 20 years later, Les asked me for a story for Omertà Press. And I just happened to have written my first story in about 25 years, which ended up being Backstory. And the experience was instrumental in getting me started writing again, you know, getting me kind of back into my writing groove, or as I think of it, my writing trench. What I'm going to read are three short stories, short poems by Les. And then because the short story doesn't make sense to read here, a poem that I think Les would have liked, and I think that is appropriate here, by Louise Bogan. So first by Les, first poem on negative capability. I am a door. What a wonderful thing. What a beautiful thing. What a glorious thing to be able to say. Second poem, misuses of poetry. Jesus was right. The grammar I undressed with my eyes had already devised the emphatic predicate of acts in space, and she acts at the outer rings of time's onion of conscious syrup that the sentence wouldn't stop. Poem number 3, Megatrends. Gestures complete the platitude. We dance with death for death's oil. Yes, there is a voice that turns cartilage to soup. Last seen walking, a huge dog over the locked earth. And yes, ever since the cyborg generation whose fulfillment and demise in San Francisco I watched, The sky glows like the town's on fire in the rain. A tree leans downhill on the slopey street, chewing a vapor, and woodenly responsive to the crisis of its time, which is long, retains its useless freedom. And now the poem by Louise Bogan. It's called Night. The cold, remote islands and the blue estuaries where what breathes the restless wind of the inlets and what drinks the incoming tide. Where shell and weed wait upon the salt wash of the sea and the clear nights of stars swing their lights westward to set behind the land. Where the pulse clinging to the rock renews itself forever. Where again on cloudless nights, the water reflects the firmament's partial setting. Oh, remember, in your narrowing dark hours, that more things move than blood in the heart.
Thank you. Terrific. Okay, Julie Rogers. This time I'll put my glasses on, make sure. Julie Rogers has been writing poetry for 50 years. She's authored several books of poetry, including House of the Unexpected, and 3 recently released titles from Omertà publications, 2 of which were written with her late husband, David Meltzer. This is one of them written by her, Street Warp. Do I have that right? Okay. Julie teaches creative writing, I think, to update this if I'm wrong, for Litquake's Elder Project, and has been coaching kids, teens, and adults in writing workshop settings for several years. She's also the founder and director of TLC, Transitional Life Care, a Buddhist end-of-life education and support nonprofit program. And she's the author of Instructions for the Transitional State, a Buddhist end-of-life manual. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, thanks very much. I feel very honored to be here. Les was a wonderful man. He made a big impact on my life and I miss him. I wish he were here. And I want to thank Megan and Hilton and Alan and Bill and everybody just for gathering together and paying homage to him. We had to wait quite a while to do this. So I'm going to read 3 poems of Les's from 3 different chapbooks of Les's. The first one is called, the book is called 11 Poems. And the poem is called End Revealed. The year of my birth changed life to abstract expressionism and bebop. It's my fault, shoot me. I will bleed with energy and complexity. A flag, a brick, a silent egg walk backward uphill. It's day dark and I'm weightless. This poem next is from Sluggo's Backyard, one of Les's books. It's called Sunday, March 17th, 2013. Nodding on Vicodin, I imagined explaining my poems to a uniformed Nazi interrogator. Recovering, I ate a pork chop and remembered to avoid alcohol. And this one, very short and very profound, from Complete Poems 2005 through 2013. This is called Nocturne. How full of itself the universe is, having outlasted the competition. And one amazing thing is Les Les and I worked on 3 books before he died, and he passed during the second one being put together. He had all 3 of them. Some very generous friends helped to publish them because that was no longer going to happen. And they're still in boxes here at the bottom of my staircase. I've not done anything with them. They've just been out for a very brief time. The first one's called, can you see, Trading Fours? And these are poems that David Meltzer, my husband, and I wrote back and forth to each other during our early romance. And Les really bugged me a lot to give them to him, and it was hard because I was still grieving. So it's definitely part of my grieving process. And the second one is called Sharing Breath, and that's more love poems. There's David. And then the final one is called Life on Earth. And this actually came out really the last, and I ended up designing it because, you know, Jesse was no longer doing that. So I'll read just a couple of poems, maybe 3. This first one is called Mugshot. Turning gray is just another disguise. Wrinkles thicker than thieves with heavy bags under eyes blurring, distances farther off. When I look up close, that face in the photo is someone else, certainly not me. Mine got lost in the mirror ages ago. Went off with that blonde, remember her? Didn't stay long, though I thought she'd never leave. Took what I had and left me with this. And I'm sure that if David were alive, he'd be reading with us today. So I'd like to read a poem I wrote for him years ago. That's in this book that we did together, Sharing Breath. And it's called Book. In your chair, your cave, head bent to book, your prayer, your cradle. Quiet lights your eyes, fingertips, bowing spine, wooing mind from its house of white head atop an old man disguise, dog-eared trappings of sage. Sweatshirt loose on bones ground down into flesh you wrestle daily. Clump along to the teapot, stand at the sink, look out over the Oakland hills, delight in their heavy gray. Pause on the walk back to swallow titles, each a cell that fled your body for the shelves. Pause again, look in on me, still across the bed, my skin your page, belly of words, mythic dark patch, your full quill, breasts, oh, love's round letters will write your poems. But today you are reading. And then one just very short. This is from Life on Earth. True research. A heart wide open is ready to live, willing to wander strange neighborhoods where we meet the world right between the eyes, daring to sit there and feel how it is for the others. We work here in the dark. Finding light pushes us past fear when we are set to discover a way to safety for those we will never know and still hold close. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Bill Zavatsky, he lives in Manhattan, where he continues to write poems and teach a poetry workshop that's been going on now for over 7 years, maybe more. As he notes, he should take a 15-minute break. Omertà published 10 poems of Arthur Rimbaud and Haiku and Company. Let me see, I have at least one of them here. There it is. Haiku. His books, poems include Where X Marks the Spot and Theories of Rain and other poems. And his translation with Jack Rugo of Andre Breton's Earthlight won the Penn Book of the Month Translation Prize. He also translated with Ron Padgett the poems of A.O. I don't know, I get my glasses again. Barnabooth by Valerie Larbeau. So, please.
Thank you, Hilton. Thanks everybody for listening and coming here to honor Les, who was one of the most generous people I've ever met. And we sort of had an in and out relationship for many years, beginning at Columbia. I don't mean we were enemies or anything, but we just, ships that didn't cross in the night. And in a sense, sort of rediscovered each other when Les started Omertà. And he asked me for work, and I gave him the Rimbaud translations, and it was wonderful and exhilarating and totally painless to work with him. And so I, like all of you, I wish he were still here, and that I could get to know him even better. I started off reading his poems saying, what the fuck is this stuff? And I've come to really enjoy them. And I enjoy their humor. Some of them are hilariously funny. I enjoy their anger. There's a tremendous amount of anger in the poems, directed at all the right places, I think. And of course, as a translator of Andre Breton, I enjoy his surrealism. I couldn't help but enjoy that. So I'm going to read 3 poems of his, and I'm going to read a handful of haiku from the Haiku and Company book. This is from A Tree and a Wagon, Found Wanting. There are vices I'll remember all my life that test me as the bottle is my witness. Rotation of gravity makes 2% milk, etc. And little babbies beyond repair of amnesia. I said I grew up on a spaceship of my own devising. Let's never change a thing. The thing. This is from Sluggo's Backyard, which has got to be one of the greatest covers with the Sluggo cartoon on it. Writing poetry, that's hard to do, Nancy says. And Sluggo says, no, it's a cinch. The dictionary has every word in it. All I have to do is rearrange the words. He got it right. So this poem is called Beyond Up and Down. And there are dates at the top of it, 1971, 2014. Lake Am Bur Game, Lake Car Gear Jail, Lake Zan Guck Bulk, Make Dar Jam Call, On Me Like Mac, Z Im Kick, Nice Dime, Zeal Band, No Lee Make Man, Jam Call Aloe Dog, On Me Like Mac Im. The third poem I'll read by Les is called My 20th Century. I don't know which book I got, which book it's in, but I got it off his website. My 20th Century. Crapola lives on windowless paper. Pale California, time into words. Principled days despite undernourished calculations. Days history calls itself rid of. 2. Give the authorial dickheads their mockumentary. An epiphenomenal tragic quorum released in the wormhole of nihilism. Then, 3. Necks, bathtubs, break the necks, confiscate the tubs. 4. All in the strategy, revolutionary, of brushing off each other's attack Jesus, leaking Cossack sawdust out where the roses sweat mercury, till snow came tumbling down on a dress rehearsal in a one-show town whose shyness lends me a time and a frame. Thank you, Les. And here are a few poems from Haiku and Company. Sunlight so strong, so bright. The shadows seem more real than the things that make them. A fly stays only for a second on my page, as if to say, I've seen this stuff before. If you need to write, you can make a desk out of anything. The wind wants to sit in that lawn chair, but knocks it over instead. And I think I have to say, without bragging too much, that I believe this is my haiku masterpiece. So I hope you're clutching your chair or your desk, wherever you are, as I read this. You know, there are always frogs in haikus. You all know that. So this is a poem about that. Frog construction crew. Rivets, 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 rivets. And that's a 575 haiku too. It's a whole lot. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
All righty.
Great to see you all.
Thank you. Terrific. All of it is terrific. I think I'm next. I'm just going to read 3 things. First, a poem by Les that from a cinch. He was writing a very high level of surrealism, you know, or from the 60s on. So, The Bad Seed. My second memory is the new machine they kept me in. I have done something. It's called a cat. Our wings, you see, must have new locking devices. But suppose a gun would locate a little playmate on the ship with its stronger body. He was a boy soprano. He will die at sea. Then there's the old man. I painted him as a horse. Among the flowers and leaves, temperatures, and the price of gas, Your plane approaches. We weren't thinking of the child. Our bunnies trampled the child. Once it drowned 6 sheep. Those sheep were very regular. And now one of the things that, let's publish this, beginning, Immigration Poems, 1924 to 1926 by Nachman Obenzinger, or Upchinger, is my father. His name was spelled several different ways. Translated from the Yiddish by Benjamin Weiner, and then I worked with him and edited. I don't think this would have been published anywhere. And I was really grateful for it to come out. And the poems, are a terrific historical document, but they're really actually pretty good poems. Before he left in Lublin, and then when he arrives in life in New York, and then he stopped writing. He kept the book for decades. And finally, I got a hold of it and was able to then have it translated. New York, December 12th, 1925, in the new land. Here in the new land, so far away, the life is so strange, and the thoughts, and the laughter, and the song. Everyone runs in a muddle, white and black, Arab and Chinese, like in a plague, like an animal through a hoop. The great omnipotent dollar. Look at it. See how it grows. So, and the last thing I'll read, it's for Diane DePrima, who we had hoped would be able to join us. But someone was very dear to Les and many people. It's called Revolutionary Letter. She wrote her series of revolutionary letters. October 5th, 2018. You're a Christian in Nazi Germany, and Jesus demands that you disobey the orders for hatred and war, even as those around you laugh at murder. You're a Jew during the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, and you know you will die, but at least a lesson will be delivered to the monsters. You're a Palestinian still holding on to the key to your home for decades, ready to return, keeping steadfast. How many years will the people of Gaza be caged? How many years will the children at the border be caged? How long will they be stolen from their parents? It's 1939, Spain. You're in the anti-fascist underground. Can you even think of life without the Generalissimo? Any day Franco will die, even if it takes decades. You're a slave in 1825 in North Carolina. Freedom is a dream, but dreams can't be enslaved. And you flee to the great dismal swamp where the slave masters fear to go. Your people have been driven from your homeland, shedding tears along the trail for hundreds of miles, yet your people still hold together, ready to build beyond tears, beyond massacres, even though Andrew Jackson wants you to disappear, but you refuse. You're a woman raped by a rich college boy. Powerful men won't believe you, but millions do. You are not alone. You will learn how many women and men roar with disbelief and rage and begin to act. No one should despair, and everyone should despair. No one should fall in tears, and everyone should sob. No one should lose hope, even though hope eludes us. No one should mourn, even as we mourn our losses. Others have suffered, others have endured. Many have been murdered, many jailed, many ignored, or have lived all their lives under the rule of hatred. We can't pay the price of freedom with credit cards. We pay for freedom with our souls, with our bodies. Get ready to overcome the horror. Get ready to fight like hell in open and hidden ways. Do not accept the orders for hatred and war. Get ready to survive. Outlast the reign of rapists, con men, and murderers. Surviving is the first road to freedom. Surviving is the revenge of the just. You too will survive. Thank you. That's going to appear in a book coming out early next year called Witness, California, 2017-2020. What? Did you turn on everyone? I thought there was some electrical problem.
No,
Uh,
that was applause.
oh, that was applause. Thank you. Well, look, this I think,
For everyone.
for everyone, right? And this was a wonderful reading, and it's wonderful seeing all the people from different aspects of Les's life and career. There are, four people who were involved at the Low Library in Columbia in 1968. There are many here who were published by Les and who knew him and loved him. And it's truly a wonderful to see everyone. Now, Megan Lamer, is that how I pronounce it? Okay. Megan Lamer is a psychologist, and Les's wife will say farewell to all of us.
Okay, well, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I want to thank all of the talent in the room, which is amazing. A few of Les's poems were just for the two of us. One of my favorites was, and I'll just preface the poem, but it basically was my no flesh, no flesh, no flesh, no flesh, onward. And it basically was because when we were in Florence and we went to see the David at the Accademia, and we're standing in line, and there was a woman there saying, no flesh, no flesh, no flash pictures of the David. And Les said, oh, I want that job. He thought it was really cool that this woman just stood there all day saying that. And he thought it would be fun to stand all day staring at the David. So that was his poem. And I always thought, I mean, he had such a great sense of humor. And I think that's really come out today. So anyway, I was really delighted when we decided to do this. Some people say that you die 3 times. You die on the day of your death, you die again on the day of your funeral, and you die the last day that somebody says your name. So I think that events like this really keep Les's memory alive. And I just want to thank everybody that made this happen, and everybody that presented today, and everybody that came. And I think this was a real tribute to Les, who I don't need to tell any of you was an amazing man. And I think this was a real tribute to him. So thanks for helping Les continue to stay alive. Thank you all.
Okay, Les, start writing.
As I said at the beginning, if anyone wants a copy of this video, just drop me a line, and I'll be